Hello and welcome back to more In the Buddha's Words. This was meant to be Thursday's video, but we're getting it done now. It's all good. All good in the neighborhood, baby. But before we get into the video, I do want to go ahead and let you know I've got two ways to donate to the channel. I have a Patreon account, which can be a month-to-month, monthly subscription type donation system. Also have a Ko-fi account, which does much of the same, but you can also just choose to don't make a one-time donation if you so wish. Do not donate if you are financially struggling. It's tough enough on everybody out there right now. I don't need you putting yourself further in trouble to show support. If you've got something else to take care of it first, please. If you can afford it and you want to, then thank you, by all means. I appreciate it. Because, like I've said before, it's me, myself, and I that do all the research, filming, editing, posting, everything like that, so. But, with that said, let's jump into the video here and, finish off the introduction for this chapter. I think chapter 9 is what we're on. From the above, we can see that the commentarial interpretation treats of the 12 factors as spread over the span of 3 lives, with ignorance and volitional formations pertaining to the past, birth and aging and death to the future, and the intermediate factors to the present. These segment from consciousness through the feeling for the resultant phase of the present, the phase resulting in the past ignorance and karma. The segment from craving throughout existence is the karmically creative phase of the present, leading to the renewed existence in the future. But existence is distinguished into 2 phases. One, called karma existence, constitutes the active side of existence and belongs to the casual phase of the present life. The other, called rebirth existence, constitutes the passive side of existence and belongs to the consultant phase of the future life. The 12 factors are also distributed into 3 rounds. The round of defilements includes ignorance, craving, and clinging. The round of action includes volitional formations of karma existence, and all the other factors belonging to the round of results. Defilements give rise to the defiled actions. Actions bring forth results, and results serve to the soil for more defilements. In this way, the round of rebirths revolves around the discernible beginning. This method of dividing up the factors should not be misconstrued to mean that the past, present, and future factors are mutually exclusive. The distribution into 3 lives is only an expository device which, for the sake of concision, has to resort to some degree of abstraction. For the suttas in the Nidana Samyutta show, groups of factors separated in the formula are inevitably interwoven in their dynamic operation. Whenever there is ignorance, craving, and clinging invariably accompany it. And whenever there is craving and clinging, ignorance stands behind them. The formula demonstrates how rebirth can take place without the presence of a substantial self that maintains its identity as it transmigrates from one life to the next, without a self of to hold the sequence together that connects one life to the next is nothing other than the principle of conditionality. Conditions in this existence initiate the arising of the conditioned phenomena in the next existence. These serve as the conditions for still other phenomena, which condition still other phenomena, and so on indefinitely into the future. The whole process ends only when the underlying springs, ignorance, craving, and clinging, which are extirpated by wisdom. Dependent origination is not a mere theory, but a teaching that should be directly known by personal existence, a point which is clearly made. The Sutta instructs the disciple to understand each for itself, its origin, its cessation, and the way to its cessation. First, one understands this pattern in relation to one's personal experience, and then on this basis, one infers that all those who correctly understood who understood these things in the past understood them as exactly the same way. Then that all those who will correctly understand these things in the future will understand them in exactly the same way. In this way, dependent origination acquires a timeless and universal significance. Several suttas hold up the dependent origination as a teaching by the middle. It is a teaching by the middle because it transcends two extreme views that polarize philosophical reflection on the human condition. One extreme, the metaphysical thesis of externalism, asserts that the core of human identity is an indestructible and eternal self, whether individual or universal. It also asserts that the world is created and maintained by a permanent entity, a god, or some other metaphysical reality. The other extreme, annihilationism, holds that at death the person is utterly annihilated. There is no spiritual dimension to human existence and thus no personal survival of any sort. For the Buddha, both extremes pose insuperable problems. Eternalism encourages an obstinate clinging to the five aggregates, which are really impertinent and devoid of a substantial self. Annihilationism threatens to undermine ethics and to make suffering the product of chance. Dependent origination offers a radically different perspective that transcends the two extremes. It shows that an individual existence is constituted by a current of conditioned phenomena devoid of a metaphysical self, yet continuing on from birth to birth as long as the causes that sustain it remain effective. Dependent origination thereby offers a cogent explanation of the problem of suffering that, on the one hand, avoids the philosophical dilemmas posed by the hypothesis of a permanent self, and on the other avoids the dangers of ethical anarchy to which annihilationism eventually leads. As long as ignorance and craving remain, the process of rebirth continues. Karma yields its pleasant and painful fruit, and the great mass of suffering accumulates. When ignorance and craving are destroyed, the inner mechanism of karmic causation is deactivated, and one reaches the end of suffering in samsara. Perhaps the most elegant exposition of dependent origination as the middle teaching is the famous Kakanagata Sutta, included in chapter 9, section 4, part 4, subsection D. Though the 12-factor formula is the most familiar version of the doctrine of dependent origination, the Nidana Samyutta introduces a number of little-known variants that help to illuminate the standard version. One such version speaks about the conditions for the continuance of consciousness. In other words, how consciousness passes on to a new existence. The causes are said to be the underlying tendencies, namely ignorance and craving, and what one intends and plans, namely the volitional formations. Once consciousness becomes established, the production of a new existence begins. Thus we here proceed directly from consciousness, the usual and third factor, to existence, the usual 10th factor. Chapter 9, section 4, part 4, subsection F says that from the 6 internal and external sense bases, the former being the usual 5th factor, consciousness, the 3rd factor, arises, followed by contact, feeling, craving, and all the rest. These variants make it plain that the sequence of factors should not be regarded as a linear causal process in which each preceding factor gives rise to its successor through the simple exercise of efficient causality. Far from being linear, the relationship among the factors is always complex, involving several interwoven strands of conditionality. The Four Noble Truths. As we have seen in both the Gradual Path to Liberation and in the Contemplation of Phenomena section of the Discourse on the Establishment of Mindfulness, the path to liberation culminates in the realization of the Four Noble Truths. These were the truths that the Buddha discovered on the night of his enlightenment and enunciated in his first discourse. The first discourse is tucked away almost inconspicuously in the Sakkasamyutta and the connected discourses on the truths, a chapter replete in many other pithy and thought-provoking suttas. To highlight the wide-ranging significance of the Four Noble Truths, the Sakkasamyutta cast them against a universal background. According to Chapter 9, Section 4, Part 5, Subsection A, not only the Buddha Gautama, but all the Buddhas, past, present, and future, awaken to these same four truths. These four truths are truths because they are actual, unerring, not otherwise. According to chapter 9, section 4, part 5, subsection C, the things the Buddha teaches are as few as the handful of leaves in the forest that he teaches are just the Four Noble Truths, taught precisely because they lead to enlightenment and nibbana. Sentient beings roam the one and wander in samsara because they have not yet understood and penetrated the Four Noble Truths. As the chain of dependent origination shows, what lies in the base of causal genesis of suffering is ignorance, and ignorance is unawareness of the Four Noble Truths. Thus, those who fail to understand the Four Truths generate volitional formations and fall down the precipice of birth, aging, and death. The antidote to ignorance is knowledge, which accordingly is defined as knowledge of Four Noble Truths. The first penetration of the Four Noble Truths occur with the attainment of stream entry called the breakthrough to the Dhamma. To make this breakthrough is by no means easy, but without doing so, it is impossible to put an end to suffering. Hence, the Buddha again and again urges his disciples to make an extraordinary effort to achieve the breakthrough to the truths. Once the disciple makes the breakthrough and sees the Four Noble Truths, more work still lies ahead, for each truth imposes a task that must be fulfilled in order to win the final fruit. The truth of suffering, which ultimately consists of the five aggregates, must be fully understood. The truth of its origin, craving, must be abandoned. The truth of cessation, nibbana, must be realized. And the truth in the way, the Noble Eightfold Path, must be developed. Developing the path brings to contemplation all four tasks, at which point one reaches the destruction of the taints. This process begins with the penetration of the same Four Noble Truths, and thus says that the destruction of the taints is for those who know and see the Four Noble Truths. The God of Wisdom. The Four Noble Truths not only serve as the objective domain of wisdom, but also define its purpose, which is enshrined in the Third Noble Truth, the cessation of suffering. The cessation of suffering is nibbana, and thus the goal of wisdom, the end toward which the cultivation of wisdom moves, is the attainment of nibbana. But what exactly is meant by nibbana? The suttas explain nibbana by a number of ways. Some define nibbana simply as the destruction of lust, hatred, and delusion. Others, such as the series comprised in Chapter 9, Section 5, Part 2, employs metaphors and images to convey a mere concrete idea of the ultimate goal. Nibbana is still the destruction of lust, hatred, and delusion, but as such it is, among other things, peaceful, deathless, sublime, wonderful, and amazing. Such descriptions indicate that nibbana is a state of supreme happiness, peace, and freedom to be experienced in this present life. A few suttas, most notably a pair in the Udana, suggest that nibbana is not simply the destruction of defilements and an exalted feeling of psychological well-being. They speak of Nibbana almost as if it were a transcendent state or dimension of being. Chapter 9, Section 5, Part 3 refers to the Nibbana as a base beyond the world of common experience, where none of the physical elements or even the subtle formless dimensions of experience are present. It is the state completely quiescent, without arising, perishing, or change. Chapter 9, Section 5, Part 4 calls it a state that is unborn, unmade, unbecome, and unconditioned, the existence of which makes possible deliverance from all the born, made, come to be, and conditioned. Now we can correlate the two perspectives on Nibbana found in the Nikayas, one treating it as an experiential state of inward purity and sublime bliss, the other as an unconditioned state of transcending the empirical world. Commentators, both Buddhists and outsiders, have tried to connect the two aspects of Nirvana in different ways. Their interpretations generally reflect the proclivity of the interpreter as much as they do the text themselves. The way that seems most faithful to both aspects of Nibbana delineated in the text is to regard the attainment of Nibbana as a state of freedom and happiness attained by realizing with profound wisdom the unconditioned and transcendent element, the state that is intrinsically tranquil and forever beyond suffering. The penetration of this element brings the destruction of defilements, culminating in complete purification of mind. Each purification is accompanied by the experience of perfect peace and happiness in the present life. With the breakup of the body at physical death, it brings irreversible release from the beginningless round of rebirths. The suttas speak of two elements of Nibbana: the Nibbana element with residue remaining, and the Nibbana element without residue remaining. Chapter 9, Part 5, Section 5 explains the Nibbana element with residue remaining to be the destruction of lust, hatred, and delusion attained by the Arahant while still alive. The residue that remains is the composite of the five aggregates that was brought into being by the ignorance and craving of the past life and must continue on until the end of the lifespan. As to the Nibbana element without residue remaining, the same text says that only that when the Arahant passes away, all that is felt not being delighted in will become cool right here. Since there is no more clinging to the five aggregates and no more craving for fresh experience through a new set of aggregates, the occurrence of the aggregates comes to an end and cannot continue. The process of the five aggregates is extinguished, which is the literal meaning of Nibbana. The Buddha says nothing at all, however, in terms either of existence or non-existence about the condition of the Arahant after death. It might seem logical to suppose that since the five aggregates that constitute experience completely cease with the attainment of Nibbana, element without residue, this element must itself be in a state of complete non-existence, a state of nothingness. Yet no text in the Nikayas ever states this. To the contrary, the Nikayas consistently refer to Nibbana by terms that refer to actualities. It is an element, a base, a reality, a state, and so on. However, though so designated, it is qualified in ways that indicate this state ultimately lies beyond all familiar categories and concepts. In Chapter 9, Section 5, Part 6, the wanderer Bhatchagata asked the Buddha whether the Tathagata, here signifying one who has attained the supreme goal, is reborn or not after death. The Buddha refuses to concede any of the four alternatives. To say that the Tathagata is reborn is not reborn. Both is and is not reborn. Neither is nor is not reborn. None of these is acceptable for all except the term Tathagata as indicative of a real being, while from an internal point of view, a Tathagata has given up all clinging to notions of real being. The Buddha illustrates this point with the simile of an extinguished fire. Just as a fire that has been extinguished cannot be said to have gone anywhere, but must simply be said to have gone out, so with the breakup of the body, the Tathagata does not go anywhere, but has simply gone out. The past participle nibbutta, used to describe a fire has been extinguished, is related to the noun nibbana, which literally means extinguishing. Yet, if this simile suggests the Buddhist version of annihilation or annihilationist view of the Arahant's fate after his demise, this impression would rest on a misunderstanding, on a wrong perception of the Arahant as a self or person that is annihilated. Our problem in understanding the state of Tathagata after death is compounded by our difficulty in understanding the state of the Tathagata even while alive. The simile is the great ocean underscores this difficulty. Since the Tathagata no longer identifies with the five aggregates that constitute individual identity, he cannot be reckoned in terms of them, whether individually or collectively. Freed from reckoning in terms of the five aggregates, the Tathagata transcends our understanding. Like the great ocean, he is deep, immeasurable, and hard to fathom. And that ends the introduction of Chapter 9. Which means in the next episode we'll be starting reading some of the actual pieces, teachings of the Buddha on the impermanence, the Four Noble Truths. Yeah. We're getting much deeper into the weeds of consciousness and the idea of Buddhism as taught by Gautama the Buddha. But yeah, with that said and done, we'll go ahead and end this episode here. As always, educate thyself, think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources, and it can't just be a bunch of tinfoil hat wearing sources or anecdotes tried to be slapped together to make a source. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.